right, everybody. Hi. Welcome to the For the Love podcast.
Welcome.
We're so happy that you are here. You're going to be so happy that you are here. We have such a good guest today.
We do.
I wanted this conversation to keep going, actually. I kept watching the clock and I realized, we're just going too long, and I couldn't bring myself. I kept asking additional questions.
Yeah.
That we didn't plan.
I was like, okay, as we wrap up, 30 minutes later, we're still talking to her.
I know. She's just so interesting. Anyway, we're going to get to it. But this is adjacent to our guest. And so my question to you is, what's your feeling on creative projects? Let's just say these can run the gamut from like arts and crafts, like all the way up to like our guest today who has art installations, and everything in between. Like, do you like that? Do you like that stuff? You have a bunch of sons, so I just don't know that this was in your life blueprint.
Some of my kids are actually very talented artists.
That's true. That's a good point.
They draw.
That's true.
They draw, they make engineering minds, which you don't necessarily think of as artistic, but it is. Like, they're always building
That's
things.
true. That's a good point.
Usually dangerous things, but still. But no, I'm not. I don't tend to be drawn to artistic things or crafts. I have too much control early on, like wanting to make things perfect.
Like you're too attached to the outcome to enjoy the process.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Like sometimes I've done like cross stitch and things where you follow a certain pattern, but a blank page is not healthy or relaxing.
Great.
For me. And I've been forbidden to teach or oversee any art projects in the homeschool community.
I'd like to know what was this birthed out of, this new initiative that you were not to touch these spaces?
Well, because I would set up too many rules. This is what the project has to look like. Then I would micromanage while children were doing it. Not even my own children, other people's.
Totally.
And then everyone worked really hard to break me of those habits, but I'm still critical of myself. And it's a great model. They're like, you cannot be critical of yourself in front of the children. Like, that's teaching them such damaging inner thoughts.
I think it's very fair to say that some brains lean entirely creative and artistic, and some lean more like analytical and logical. And that's okay. There's a place for both brain.
Right.
We need both those brains in the world. I am both, but I love creativity. Obviously I'm a writer.
Obviously.
It's a different, it's not like art like that you would do with paint or something, or clay, but that is a narrow definition of art. When I think of like creativity, the blank page is a good example. Like, what will I bring forth from nothing? And I love it. Later in this interview, we're talking with our guest about that thing in your life where you've got a task in front of you, or an invitation or an opportunity or something, and you have like a spike of anxiety because it's out of alignment for you, essentially. I am never out of alignment on my creative work, ever. And it's what I crave doing. So when I'm in the weeds on the stuff I don't like, and I'm feeling that dark feeling, it is solved for me by opening a blank page. Nice. So creativity is what soothes me. It's really the only thing I'm naturally good at.
I will say, I don't think the door is completely shut for me. Like, I think I could probably find a way to be creative without being controlling, like to enjoy the process just for the process itself. And maybe it's
what you select.
Right.
It's the venue to get there. The vehicle maybe is really specific to you, which isn't maybe as outcome specific.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be.
So I don't know. Someday I'll find it. But not today.
I used to spend, I don't even know, I would not even want to know what the dollar amount is, to be frank, on creative memories. Do you know what I'm saying when I say that? The scrapbooks. Do you remember about the scrapbook?
Do you remember?
Did you do it?
Yes, I was gifted the whole thing.
Oh.
Like the scissors, the everything.
It's expensive as shit.
An incredible, generous gift. And then the first thing you have to do is cut up a picture into a shape.
My heart is so broken. I wish you could see how many of my children's baby pictures are in the shape of a star.
Oh, I did one page. I went to like a meetup.
Yeah, of course.
I did one page and I could not bear it. And actually, when we just like moved out of the house, packed everything up, I found it and I threw that one page away.
So you did the one page, the one singular page that would go in a photo album.
It was in the book, yes.
Geez.
The first page.
A whole shelf full of them. And don't forget, I mean, this is in the olden days of me having actual babies. And that was when we didn't have digital pictures. So those were literally my only pictures that I got from Walgreens developer.
Right.
So it's not like I had a backup whole picture. I had the one picture and I cut it into a triangle.
Why? Why did we do this?
Because the people told me at the workshops. And then we put them with like the little borders. And then they got fancy. We put little grommets on the edges and little sticker banners that we would write, Gavin, January 1999 or whatever across that page.
And there are people who are incredibly talented in this space. Brad's cousin made so many beautiful custom photo albums. I don't know how she does it. Like that it's a gift. I went to a 3-hour meetup and did a single page and then never picked it up again.
Well, you know
It's
what?
too hard.
Consider yourself lucky. You found a very quick off-ramp. Me and Jenny, on the other hand, we went to whole weekends. No, yes, we did. Weekends. I had a rolling cart. That's how much shit I bought. Like every kind of paper cutter and every kind of stamper router. I can't remember what they were all called. I had 50 pairs of scissors, some edgy, some wavy. I cannot. Endless papers. Anyway, we did that for years. And then because I had done like 3 albums per baby, when Caleb finally came around, I'm like, I can't send him to therapy because he's the only baby who didn't get one. So I saw it through Caleb's baby album and I hung up my scissors.
Good for you.
And then I became a writer and I channeled it into a much more productive, creative path. Okay, very quick, because we could really, really go on about this. But this is a segment we love called Bless and Release.
Bless and release. You know you got to bless and release.
Now, this particular installment of Bless and Release is in honor of our guest today, and it is called Loud Quitting, which you will shortly find out about. It's a tip of the hat to her. And so my question to you is this. Is there anything at all in your life, anything at all? It can be in any category. It can be work, it can be family, it can be relationships, it could be personal, it could be body, it could be your own personal thoughts, it can be friendship, it can be extended family. I don't care what it is. That it is time to loudly quit. Or maybe it's in hindsight. This is a time in which you quit something loudly, which is to say, not apologetically, not passive aggressively, not I'm just going to slip out the side door and hope nobody notices, but like in an assertive, clear way, this is a thing I am going to quit because it's time.
I don't have anything right now
Okay.
that I'm prepared to loud quit. My life's pretty pared down to the essentials.
Yeah.
Right now, out of necessity and just because of work I've done. I think the biggest thing I loud quit in this decade that has made the biggest difference is not coloring my hair.
You did loud quit that. You quit that loudly.
I just quit.
Maybe like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. And I'm still not sorry about it.
Not with hair like yours. You look like a hair model.
Well,
You look like a hair model.
not at my age usually, but also yes, because
It looks amazing.
listen, I started going grade 18.
Yeah.
I colored it for
All the times.
I'm not great at math, a really long time. And it just was damaging it, and it wasn't working, and I didn't want to deal with it. And it was COVID, which was such an easy way out. So, I cut it into a mullet for a contest. I think I've talked about that.
That's not a joke, by the way. That's a real thing.
I won. And then I had to hack it all off to fix the mullet. And then I just never colored it again.
That's right. And when you say it has made the biggest difference, what do you mean by that? In what way?
That is something I really thought about every single day. Because my hair grows pretty fast. It's so white in places, and it used to be brown. And so I colored it brown. And so I had roots.
All the time.
And so it was just something that was just nagging in the back of my brain all the time, and not in a good way. Didn't make me feel great about myself. It was something I had to do. It was something I felt bad about. And so I just quit. And
also, you're a silver fox. Like, you had the advantage of it being beautiful. Like, you have beautiful hair.
That's very nice.
It's just the truth.
I did not know. I'd been
How would you?
Coloring it forever. So I was pleasantly surprised. But also, I don't subscribe to this, like, some gray is prettier than other gray. Like, it's just what color our hair is. Actually, like, we're humans with hair, and it goes gray.
That's right.
Sometimes, some people don't.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. I mean, Shauna Shelton is 50 years old. She is our age. She has never put a millimeter of color on her hair. Not even a drop of hair color on her hair. And it is blonde as a high school cheerleader. There's not a gray to be found. Some people just, this is their life they have.
This is their life. But for those of us who don't have those genetics, like, why do we feel so bad about it?
I don't know why. Because we're not allowed to age. That is, anyway, that's a good one.
I loud quit that. And so what that means is the next time I want to loud quit something, like, I have some, like, positive reinforcement that it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, you can walk away from things.
That's right. And then also there's community around loud quitting that particular thing. Like, I have absolutely seen that story repeated on socials these last 4 years. Of women going, no, I choose to not do this anymore. And this is my beautiful hair, this is what it looks like when you're at this age. And I'm like, and you look fantastic.
So what are you loud quitting?
I love this idea of loud. I absolutely love it. I was telling Lisa, who's about to come on with us earlier, I am a person who has this toxic combination of saying yes all the time. My yes valve is just almost always open without a throttle, and obligation. And then I have this deep-seated aversion to feeling lazy. Which is absurd. Nobody in God's earth would say that I was a lazy person. Everybody in my life that loves me tells me I work too much.
Yes.
And
you are so much better about this now.
And that is really saying something. I am better than I'm so much better than a decade ago. But so I'm not a good quitter, period. Or when I am, I do it in a shitty way. Like, I want to slunk away, or I want to just absolutely over apologize for it. And then worry it to death that I have let somebody down, or they're disappointed in me, or whatever all that is, where all that comes from. I think that's Enneagram 3 stuff, I'm pretty sure. But I quit. I had one of my business lines was just my least favorite thing. And it had grown, and it had grown, and it had grown, and it had grown because it pays the bills. And that is important. I have a staff to pay. I pay me and Amanda's health insurance and our retirement funds and her salary and mine. And there is a lot, and I'm single. And so I have the pressure of being the only earner in my life with 5 children who are as expensive as shit. And so there's a place for that, but it had outpaced my good cheer. And it had been outpacing my good cheer, and I've been saying it for 2 years. Yikes. And so in December, when we had one of our kind of team meetings, I said, in 2025, I'm not doing this anymore. Or not exactly. What I said is I'm not doing it to this capacity anymore.
Yeah.
There's a sliver of it where I still feel in alignment, and that's the sliver I'm going to keep in. And everything outside of that, and I understand that's going to make us make less money. I understand that it's going to affect our bottom line. I understand that it's going to affect the budget, and I accept that. Nice. So it felt really good to do, and I'm just now catching up with that boundary because I had to see through some contracts that were still kind of on the docket, but that did feel good.
It's so nice to let go of something in a healthy, mature way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then to be clear about it, there's something too about the clarity. Of course, Lisa calls it being loud, but that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek word. Really what she means is being clear. Mm-hmm. Just being clear. Like, this is the decision I made. This is why. Not that we have to explain ourselves, but in some cases it's helpful or it's useful or it is to me. And then that's that. So also in a smaller note, I have decided this year in 2025, I have got to quit. I have got to quit codependent parenting a couple of my kids. I have to quit. This has become super clear to me in the last 2 months that I cannot care more about a specific thing for a child than that child cares about themselves.
I know.
I can't do it.
Ugh.
And I have tried. I mean, I have thrown every bit of energy, mentor, coach, experience, support system, all of it. Everything I could possibly do in my power. And it is not enough. So I'm like, oh, this isn't my life.
Right.
This is not my life. Once you're in the young adult zone, you're going to have to just care about your life the most. You're the one who has to care the most.
That is such a hard lesson.
It is brutal.
And it looks different with each kid. So you have to learn that lesson anew.
Exactly. That's why this is taking me so long.
And over.
Because this kid is different.
They trick you.
They trick you. Another word for that is gaslighting. They gaslight you.
They do.
Anyway, and it's because we want to mother better than anything else we do. We're an easy target.
Oh my gosh.
I'm the easiest target.
Yes, for sure.
So anyway, I'm working on that. More on that later. But that is a segue. Oh, by the way, listener, and we are loving that you are doing this. And so I want to just say, we are in the process of gathering submissions for you on a bunch of our segments, including Bless and Release, specifically loud quitting. We want to hear about you. What are you loud quitting? So if you go to jenhatmaker.com/podcast, or if you just go to jenhatmaker.com and pick the podcast button, you will see right there, there's a send voicemail button. All you have to do is press us and leave us a message. Tell us, this is what I am loud quitting, or this is what I want to loud quit. And you may find your message broadcast on our little show. So thanks for playing along with us. What are you loud quitting? This is a good transition into the episode. We are in this midlife renaissance series, and we are looking at what a midlife renaissance looks like from several angles. So just as a recap, we had Building Your Belonging Circle with Dr. Tama Bryant, and she talked about friendships at this age, at our age. And by the way, not 1 week after we recorded with Dr. Tama, she was on Oprah's podcast. So
She was.
I texted Amy, I'm like, well, I think Oprah saw that she was on our show, and she was like, all right, that's it, green light. Let's get Dr. Tama on my show as well. We had Erin Hicks Moon on called Sacred Reimagination, and we're looking at midlife through a faith lens. What are we doing with the faith of our childhood at this age and at this stage? How is it evolving? How are we evolving? And we have several more incredible guests in this exact series looking at these big constructs that are all of a sudden going through some sort of change or evolution in the middle of life. And so today, we're talking all about awakening to your next chapter. What that looks like when women either rediscover or discover for the first time not just their passions and their gifts and their talents, but even their identity. in midlife and what it means to let go of an old story, right? Or of an old role, or what it means actually in a positive space to reach for what is going to bring you to life, what is going to bring you like fully awake in your life. So I can't tell you how much our guest today fits this bill so beautifully. We have on today Lisa Congdon. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it should. She is an internationally known artist, illustrator, blogger, writer. For the purposes of our conversation today, she spent her first 15 years of her career in public education. She was an elementary teacher, and then she was a project manager for 2 different nonprofits. And so that took her all the way to her mid to late 30s. So she had already charted a certain path and then had a complete career shift just before she hit 40. So now Lisa is a big deal. There's no other way to put it. She runs a popular shop that showcases her art. She lives in Portland, Oregon with her wife, Clay, and their dog, Milkshake. Shout out to Milkshake. She's an avid cyclist. She's 57 years old. She bicycles thousands of miles a year. I don't know how to help you process that, but that's what she does. That's her choice. Her body, her choice, okay? She's 2 years sober. She's the author of 10 books. And so there's a lot of places where you are going to know her work. I particularly know her work from Target, where it's like, I just assumed she was like the CEO of Target for a while because her stuff was so prominently featured, and I conflated the 2 brands after seeing her stuff for so long. Her books include Art Inc., The Essential Guide to Building Your Career as an Artist. She wrote Find Your Artistic Voice. So she's like so interesting, and she's been featured in everywhere on earth. She blends her passions for social justice and mentoring and teaching with her art. She is a success any which way you slice it. But I think more importantly for our conversation today, she is a wonderful human being. And I love the way she talks about change and agency and coming into your own life and really being the author of your own story. And this is a conversation we are having constantly, not just on this show, but at this season of life. And so I cannot think of a better guest to have in this series than the talented, the lovely, the fabulous Lisa Congdon. Lisa, welcome to the show. I was telling Amy earlier when she first got here, I'm like, I feel like I've been around Lisa's work for just ages. Like I just conflate art and joy and really, really good like commerce and marketing with your name. Like, well done, you.
Thank you. That's so nice to hear.
You've had such like amazing success. It's really awesome to look at from the outside, and just a joy to find out when you kind of started, the genesis of your work. And we're going to get into all that, but it's just one of the stories that I love the most. And I was really telling Amy all that in advance. Like, you're one of those people that I love to talk to so much for so many reasons. And not the least of which is right here, which is where we're going to start. Because this is the perfect explanation of why we so wanted to have you on. This was 2 years ago. Indulge me in reading your own words back to your face. Okay.
Please do.
You put this on Instagram on your 55th birthday. You said, "My life as a 55-year-old is not how I would have imagined it when I was 13 or 17 or even 29 or 35. I'm not actually sure how I would have imagined myself as a 55-year-old person, but I do know I would not have imagined that I would be an artist, especially in all the ways I'm an artist, or that I would ride my bike thousands of miles a year up and down mountains, or that I would travel to foreign countries by myself, or that I would be happily and legally married to a woman who loved me back, or that I would be so rich in friendship, or that I would feel so happy and content and excited about what's next." I love all of that. Today, I am really grateful for this life and to have reached this age, and that I am so immeasurably fortunate. That's everything. I love that so much, so much. And so if you will indulge us just for a minute, I'd love to go back to say Lisa at 35. Like, who were you? Who was that Lisa? Who was that Lisa at the time? Who did that Lisa think she was going to become? I'd love to hear it.
I think the real difference between Lisa then and Lisa now is that I really had no sense of agency when I was 35. I believed I was unlovable. I think some of that was the way I was raised. You know, my love language is words of affirmation, and my parents are kind of hard knocks, silent generation folks who weren't and still aren't into words of affirmation. And so I always questioned my inherent worth because very few people in my life as a kid told me I was good or worthy. I think some of that was being queer and my own, you know, internalized homophobia.
Sure.
I think I was also someone who believed and really never entertained any other option that I was a victim of circumstance or bad luck. And so I had no real sense of, you know, like power in myself, that I could live the life that I wanted. It never even occurred to me. It was like, oh, I haven't met the person who's going to love me forever. Well, darn it. Or there must be something wrong with me so that hasn't happened. You know, I'm not succeeding at work. Well, you know, bad luck, or I guess it was a combination of, like this sense of bad luck or fate, or some sense of unworthiness. And I was a really sensitive person as a child, and I mean, I still am. And I don't think I got what I needed to feel safe and secure. And so I also want to say that I know my parents loved me, and I know they did the best that they could. They're really wonderful people, but they were young, and they didn't really have the tools they needed to parent three kids with three very different sets of needs. And so that was sort of like, you know, I was one of those people. And when I say I didn't feel unlovable, I didn't necessarily feel like a garbage human. Like I knew I was a good person, but I didn't, like imagining that I could be a person who influenced other people or made art that people will pay thousands of dollars to buy. Not that money really matters. It's more just like the idea of that, or that, you know, I would write books or fall in love and stay married to somebody who I had a really profoundly healthy relationship with. Like, I just could never have imagined that for myself. I think I imagined myself sort of living a really kind of sad, mediocre life. Fortunately, some things happened that changed all of that. But that's sort of where I was at 35.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Listen, there is a downside to the opposite of that. I will just tell you, and Amy will confirm this. If I were to loan you my dad is, his only gear is words of affirmation. He doesn't have another gear. And so what happened, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, is that my dad so overly affirmed us that we all like steered into adulthood thinking, well, we are the shit. Like all 4 of us, apparently, I guess this family just hit the jackpot. And so we were like solidly in our like late 20s before it occurred to any of us that we were just sort of medium. Like we did not know that we were the average, like maybe average plus at best. So listen, I'm just saying there's a downside to too many words. Amy knows, she's like close to my dad.
Yeah.
Like I loan my dad out to my friends. I'm like, just let's bring Larry in. He will make you feel better about this, whatever. Even if you have profoundly failed, my dad will find a way to be like, well, it's everybody else's fault that they're jackasses. He would, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Anyway,
That
I'm
is
just
so
saying.
funny.
Yeah. Somewhere between your dad and mine is like
It's probably
probably
the
a
perfect
healthy dad. Yeah. That's right. Exactly.
In your book, Find Your Artistic Voice, you said, until I was my mid-30s, I didn't think my life mattered much or that I had anything interesting to say. Making art changed my relationship to my story. So what was the genesis of that? Like, how did art come in and change your perspective on your own life?
So around the time I was, I was probably 36 or 37, I was pretty depressed and really struggling in my life. I mean, I had a good job and I was pretty successful in what I was doing at the time. I worked for an education nonprofit, had friends. I was a competitive swimmer at the time, and I had a pretty full life looking at it from the outside, but inside I was definitely sad and out of desperation, I was like, I need to go to therapy. And I had been to therapy before, but I hadn't really seen a therapist who was able to help me or break through. And I found this really amazing woman, and she at first helped me to come to terms with this belief that I was unlovable. So, I was sort of caught up in this notion of being unlovable, and it became my identity. And then, the cycle kind of played out in every human relationship. I would choose people who were sort of unavailable or kind of dicks to me. And then, it would reinforce that identity,
Right.
And she also helped me see this core belief I had, which is that I was a victim of life. And until that point, I really had never entertained another possibility. And she suggested to me that I was, kind of creating my own unhappiness by choosing to stay in this cycle. And, you could take that as like she's blaming me for my unhappiness, which she wasn't. We definitely sort of unpacked my childhood and that whole process. But she suggested to me that I also had the power to create my own happiness. And I didn't really know how that worked, but I was like, you know what? I'm all in. I've hit rock bottom here. So one of the things I decided to do was sort of develop this new narrative for my life. And I began to reframe my story for what my life could be and who I was and who I wanted to, become. And I needed to start believing, not just saying, but believing that I had worth and that I was smart and talented and worthy of love and all the things that I had previously told myself that I wasn't. And I understood for the first time that no one could do that for me. Not a partner, not a friend, not my parents, right?
Right.
No one but me. And I had sort of been living with a lot of shame, very internalized shame. And I think I started to understand that what undoes shame is giving it a voice. And so I spent a lot of time in therapy uncovering all this stuff I'd been pushing down in a way, the things about myself that I hated, that I never gave word to, but like walked around with every day. And I began to sort of acknowledge and release all of that stuff, like say it out loud to this person who wasn't judging me. And it was like a cleansing. And then I was able to move on in a different direction with agency and purpose. And that's when I started making art, and dreaming of what my life could be, and how I could show up in the world. And that was really the genesis. And of course, that took years of practice and failing and, but that was really the moment. It wasn't like one moment, but sort of like a series of moments that really shifted my life in a new direction. And I wish everyone who went to therapy had that sort of profound experience. And it doesn't always happen, but for me it did. And I'm forever grateful for that.
I love that origin story. I would really like to hear you talk about what happened there in those earliest years, because you did Scorched Earth. You did a whole new deal. You started essentially kind of a whole new trajectory. And I really like the way that you've talked about that a lot of times online, in just this sort of through the lens of this was a process and a learning process and a learning curve and a failure process. And, you don't just come straight out of the gate and land a huge account at Target. This was a deal, and I love it. I was telling Amy, one of my favorite stories is a pivot story where a woman has gone north of that season where we're, encouraged to chart our course and then I guess follow it till we're dead. I don't really know. I think that storyline is changing obviously now, but that at that point you're like, I'm going in a different direction entirely. Not just in my career, but in my life narrative, in my relationships. That's a pretty big deal. So can you talk about the earlier years of developing your art? And where did that come from? And was that just dormant in your little body until you like lit a match under it? Because that's a pretty big departure.
Mm-hmm. I think it was dormant. I have I was in a relationship with a woman for about almost a decade when I was in my 20s before any of this happened. Mm-hmm. And she passed away suddenly about 4 or 5 years ago, and we had stayed in touch after we broke up. Mm-hmm. And so it was pretty sad. And her sister and I are still really close, and she sent me a bunch of stuff that I had made for her and given her when we were together. And so there were all of these pieces of art that I had made for her and all of these creative projects that I did. And so it was such a good reminder that like, I think I've always been an artist and I've always been a maker and I've always been super creative. But because I was so full of self-doubt, I never really did anything with it or put it out into the world in any way. Not that you have to. If you're a creative person, but you work at a bank and that makes you happy, then that's what you should do. But I clearly was meant to like make art and put it into the world. And so kind of like, I think what happened at that moment that I just described earlier was that I kind of gave myself permission to just play and explore. Like, I cannot tell you the level of joy and excitement I felt once I realized that I could change my own life. It was like something, I was like lit on fire because for so many years I had no sense of agency. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, I can do whatever I want. I can create the life I want. And so, I just started to do that. And part of that was like working on relationships and all kinds of other things. But part of it was just really letting myself be creative. And at the time I had a full-time job and I set up this room in my apartment. I was living by myself in San Francisco at the time. And I had this room in my apartment and I just set it up as an art studio. And I started taking classes and I had no aspiration to be a professional artist. It was more like, I'm just going to explore this part of myself. I mean, it was probably within a few years that I was like, I want to do this all of the time. But really it was initially more like, what do I have to lose? Like, why not me? Why wouldn't I do this? Like, this is, what I want to do. And then I started a blog. I had a blog like in the early days.
Sure.
And it was called A Bird in the Hand. And I started writing about what I was making and, I was crafting a lot. I would have considered myself more of a crafter at the time. And then, it sort of all evolved. And eventually, I think because the timing of this awakening, for lack of a better term, for what was happening in my life was right at the time that the internet was becoming a space for creative people to share what they were making. And I was sort of at the precipice of that. And so I started, had this blog and then, I got on Flickr and I was like sharing photos of stuff I was making and I was meeting all these other bloggers and makers. And I started to see a picture of what was possible through what other people were doing. And of course, what was possible then is very different than what's possible now because the internet has changed and ways of sharing and selling your work on the internet has changed. But I was really like the timing of my entry was right when that was happening. And
what year was this?
This was like 2004.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, that was the front edge of that space.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, and then I was also exposed to people, who were blogging about other things, like not creativity related at all, but being a mom or, this whole world that we've been part of. And, I just started kind of meeting people and probably unbeknownst to me, influencing people by the stuff that I was making and writing about. And, eventually in 2007, I went part-time at work, and I was like, I'm going to try this. And then within 6 months, I quit my job because I was like not making a ton of money, but I was making enough to pay my mortgage, and I just wanted to give it a try. I thought, what have I got to lose?
And real quick, just for context.
Yes.
At that time, what did that look like in terms of how were you monetizing? Were you selling to individual people? Did you have a digital storefront? It's fun to see the arc of how your work has found its way into the world. What was it like there?
Yeah, I opened an Etsy shop. I haven't been on Etsy for years now because I have my own e-commerce shop, but that was the place that I started, and I was selling like really janky things.
Sure.
To be honest, occasionally through my blog, I would get a commission. I was being asked to have shows in little stores, and I wasn't in the gallery world yet, but like really kind of small time stuff.
Yeah.
At the time, I also opened a shop in San Francisco with a friend of mine. And it still exists today. It's called Rare Device, and it's on its third owner now. But that was originally the store I opened with my friend Rena, so that was like a little bit more income. So I found this sort of ways to cull together, enough to get by. And by 2012 or 13, which was only, 5 years later, I was being asked by Chronicle Books to write a book about, making a living as an artist. That's how, that 5 years felt like forever to me, but it was so fast. I really figured out very quickly, how to make this work. And I think part of that is because I was already in my 40s. I had all of this work experience. I had worked in an office. I knew how to communicate with people.
Totally.
I understood the importance of like timely communication and meeting deadlines. And I just had dialed in a lot of what, you don't necessarily know when you're 22 or 23 and just exiting art school.
Sure.
It was almost like my business skills were way more advanced than my art skills. That was really where I needed to catch up because I'm self-taught, and I had to like really practice drawing and, all of that, like pretty seriously. I also signed with an agent in 2008. And she saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. Like my portfolio was pretty small. But I think she just knew, and she took a risk on me, and I stayed with her for about 6 years until I went out on my own. And that was also really confidence boosting for me and super helpful. She mentored me quite a bit. So a lot of really pivotal things happened in the beginning there. And I had, I was a mature adult. And I, just really worked on refining my technical skill. Around the same time I got into a relationship, I was used to sort of working all of the time.
Yeah.
And then that really had to shift. And I had to have more boundaries around work so that I could make time for this new relationship. But, that was sort of like how I started at the time.
I appreciate so much that you have found a way as a queer artist to blend your passion with standing up against injustice, working with nonprofits and marches and causes, using your art in such an important way, but also maintaining so much joy and life and color and happiness. Like how have you drilled down on that ability to maintain joy when working on such important things? You've said, I think you wrote on Instagram, art isn't always pain and angst. For many of us, it's survival and ultimately real joy. So can you tell us about your personal aesthetic, how you've developed that?
Well, a little context. When I was a working woman. I worked at a nonprofit, and our mission and vision was, like, basically it was like OG DEI work. So we were like going into schools and working with schools on their own internalized, racism, and working with teachers on sort of changing their perspective on expectations for kids of color and things like that. So I was sort of steeped in this world of social justice before I became an artist. And so when I left to sort of open the shop with my friend and make art full time, I had this I was like, I felt kind of guilty, that I was leaving this other world behind. And I think I imagined myself just sort of sitting in my studio, drinking my tea and listening to NPR and drawing and when I finally, had my own studio and was making art for a living, there was something that felt like it was missing. And so over the years, I sort of more and more and more, this, my passion for social justice sort of got enveloped into my work. I think it took a real turn in 2016, but, it always sort of has been. And so, that has always been an important part of my work. And because I spent so many years, like, I think as somebody who was living in a lot of darkness, and then I finally like found this light, in myself and in the world, and I just started living with more joy and more agency, it sort of naturally came into my work. Like I'm asked quite a bit, because I do tackle heavy subjects in my work, but but my work is also sort of colorful and bold and bright and often very joyful. And I think that it is the marriage of like my passion for social justice sort of married with, this, kind of very authentic joy that I have for life. And that sort of marriage seems to really work for me. I don't know that I'm able to make work that is dark. Some of my work is darker than, some pieces are darker than others. And, I have some pieces that I think are pretty powerful in their edginess. But, most of my work is sort of, I approach, things like, I think about how do I want to say this thing, like, so that people will hear it. And is this thing that I'm about to say something that I've lived and experienced myself? That's also another important rule to me, that every issue that I address through my work has to be something that I either have personal experience with or that has touched me personally, so that it can come from a very like authentic place. And how can I, create. So, and I guess that also leads me to say things in a way in just sort of plain language that people understand. Cause I'm not bullshitting, and so that comes through, I think. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how I want to say things, not just in, on Instagram in a written description of my art, but like actually in the messages of my work. And then, how can I best express this through color and shape and symbol. And I don't really know, it's like hard as an artist to kind of describe what you're thinking about when you're making art, because it all just comes so intuitively. But it is something that I have become known for and makes me, I love that people say to me, your work is so powerful, but it's also so joyful. Like, I think that's so important right now. I think it is the only way we are going to survive right now is through joy and through resilience and through hope. And whatever I can do to contribute to that, I'm there.
I cannot agree more. That's why we asked you that question. We're just reeling. And I'm noticing right now, particularly in this calendar year, since everything just waves hands around everything, how corrosive an effect it has on me if I have not like curated my intake right now. I've said on the show for the last couple of months, for better or for worse, I have not been on the news since November 6th, like cable news, like whatever turns onto your TV, that kind of news. And then I noticed that's not even enough for me to not walk around with the spirit of such despair. I had to curate my feed too. And I'm talking about even people that I have followed for years with whom I am in alignment. Like we are rowing in the same boat. And even then, the constancy of despair and outrage, I just noticed I'm not doing well. Like I'm just not doing well. And I need to be doing better than this as a leader. And as somebody for whom I've got a community paying attention. And so I've got my eyes tuned. I am looking for people who are still telling the truth. I'm not interested in imagining that everything is fine or sticking my head in the sand or just turning a back on injustice. I don't have that gear either. I couldn't do that if I wanted to. But I am looking who can help me hold truth with hope and joy and goodness and possibility still. And I find that demographic to be small. That's a shrinking space to try to find and grapple for. And I think we're going to have to fight for it with a lot of intention. So I appreciate you being one of those people, one of those voices who is doing a both and right now. But you're still being a truth teller. You're still being a justice seeker. And you are being a joy creator. It's a very, very tricky needle to thread. And I'm really, really grateful for it, just as a person who's seeking that out right now and having a hard time finding it, a really hard time finding it. And then grappling around with, am I doing this poorly? If I change the dial on the type of intake, am I being a bad leader? Am I being a bad citizen? I don't even know. It's so weird in the head right now. It's so noisy and disastrous. So I'm curious, as somebody in the queer community for whom things are pretty dire. I mean, they always have been, to be honest, but it certainly feels like we are regressing right now. And you're a woman, so sorry about that body that you're also living in. So you're in a couple of demographics right now that are in trouble. I'd like to hear how you are maintaining your hope. How are you keeping that alive? What are you doing to keep it flickering and active and sincere, not just false positivity? That's not helpful for anybody right now. What's keeping the flame lit for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for all the things you just said. That means a lot to me. Well, the first thing that I had to come to terms with, or I have come to terms with, or that I understand profoundly, is my privilege. Mm-hmm. I am straight passing. Mm-hmm. My wife is not, but I am straight passing. Mm. I am financially well off. Mm-hmm. And I live in Portland, Oregon, which is probably one of the most wonderful safe havens for queer people in the country. Yeah. And Oregon, in general, is got massive protections for queer and trans people. So I have an enormous amount of privilege. And so the question I like to ask myself is, yes, sure, I'm part of the queer community. I am, I have, people who are extremely close to me who are trans and who non-binary, and all of these populations who are being attacked. And, attempts, there are attempts at their erasure. Because I am in a position where I'm sort of adjacent, I'm in the community and adjacent, like very closely adjacent to all of these people. I'm in an interesting position because I have a platform that is large, and I do think that even, I don't necessarily feel like I'm in an echo chamber entirely. I think to a certain degree I am, but I do think that I have a lot of influence over my followers around trans issues in particular. And I've sort of chosen that as my I feel like after the 2016 election, we were like, it was like whack-a-mole because there was like so many issues and we were all trying to solve all of them. And by now we're like, okay, we all know what the things are. And so we've got to focus on one or, you know, whichever ones you care most about. And people are tackling different things. And this is the issue that I decided to focus on. It's not that I don't care about immigration and abortion rights and all of those things, but, you know, this is the most personal thing to me. I have a platform. I've got some privilege here, and I have a talent that can change minds, you know, if I use it well. And so I get up every day and I think about what I can do. I still also listen to the news or read things that make me cry. I have moments where I feel so sad and defeated, just like everyone else. But I also happen to be this pretty resilient person, and I'm pretty good at sort of removing myself from drama. And I have a pretty good ability to compartmentalize, for better or for worse. And I've just, you know, this is what I'm meant to do right now. And I spent a lot of time in the last 10 years really thinking about purpose and the role of purpose in my life and values. Like I even published a values deck that people can use to sort through their own values to sort of figure out what's important to them. And service and generosity are two examples of values that are really important to me. And I wake up every day and think about how I can use my skill and talent and influence for good. And this is how I'm doing it right now. And I think it's so helpful for me because I feel like there's something I can do. And there's a way I can influence. I'm sure you experience this too. You have an audience, people look up to you, and there's something about that is this like responsibility, and I take it very seriously. I sometimes, you know, most of my friends are not famous artists and don't have 500,000 Instagram followers. And, you know, I think sometimes it's harder for them. Like, yes, I'm in the public eye and people can disagree with me publicly and all of those things, and potentially I could become a target, but I have these ways that I'm able to show up because of what I've built. And I think for a lot of my friends, it's harder because they're like, who am I? What can I actually do that's going to make a difference? And I think in some ways they're struggling more because they feel so powerless in the face of what's happening. And I'm just grateful that there is something I can do. And I'm going to try to do it every single day. So that's kind of how I do that. And I'm going to do it as joyfully as possible.
Yeah. Thank you. It makes a huge difference.
It sure does.
For sure.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, we want to talk to you about this idea of loud quitting that you've talked a lot about. In having all these conversations with women our age about pivoting, re-examining our lives, like finding different purpose, we've got to free up space in order to do these new things, whether we know what they're going to be or not. And sometimes that requires loud quitting.
You've sense of agency. Yeah,
you've written about it, and you've said, I've been on this systematic mission to examine and quit everything in my life and work that feels finished or draining or one-sided or without purpose or joy. So far, in the past 9 months, I've quit alcohol, food restrictions, teaching college, my podcast, 2 boards of directors, working on Fridays, working on umpteen client projects at once, on. And you've not felt as happy and balanced ever. Can you talk to us about this idea and what made you start just embracing loud quitting in your life?
Yeah, and not just the quitting part, but the loud part. I want to hear you speak about both words.
Yeah. That was, you know, the other quote you read at the beginning of the podcast is kind of full circle. I did this when I was 55, so 2 years ago, almost exactly. So It continues to this day. I don't have much left to quit because now my life is sort of pared down to the things that really matter to me. But I found myself at this point where I was burned out. I mean, yes, I love what I do, and I'm definitely a people pleaser. So I was saying yes to a lot of things over the years, and I found myself in this place where I was sort of exhausted and miserable, and I found that I was doing things out of obligation, even things that people would come to me and say, I want to collaborate with you on this thing. And it was a beautiful thing.
Sure,
of
course, it usually is.
Yeah. But that I was already tapped out, or, it involved me doing something that I just didn't want to do. And so I really worked hard at, letting go. And it really did start with sobriety. My sobriety journey is sort of interesting. I quit drinking after a bout of my one and only bout of COVID. I got so sick, and my inflammatory response was so intense that the doctor was like, no sugar, no alcohol. And then I stopped drinking, and after I got well, I never drank again. I was in this place of such clarity about, I was definitely drinking too much before. I was, probably drinking 7 days a week, at least half a bottle of wine. Wine was my wine down at the end of the night, or at the beginning of the night, I should say, end of the day. And I had such clarity, and all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, I want to feel this sense of relaxation and clarity and chill way more. And so I'm going to, I just got in this sort of systematic process of taking an inventory of my life, essentially. What is it? How am I spending my time? What are I would go through every day, and every time I felt that sort of rush of anxiety go from my stomach to my chest, I would stop and I would say, okay, Lisa, what's happening for you right now? Why are you feeling this way? And is it because you're about to do something you don't want to do, or you're overwhelmed because you feel too sort of crunched, or, you feel like you can't get off the hamster wheel because it's just been going nonstop. And I started to question everything. And then I sort of had to systematically, quit things. And I did it, I was loud about it. I had to leave these 2 boards of directors, and I was like, I love y'all, but I'm trying to simplify my life and have more spaciousness. And I realize that this is a value of mine that I'm not honoring. And, I was teaching at the college level at that time. Yeah. I left that, and I just sort of started making more time, and I stopped working on Friday. So I still only do a 4-day work week, and it was just incredible. And I was, not trying to hide from anybody why I was quitting the thing.
Right.
And I just wanted people to know it wasn't quiet quitting. I wasn't going to walk away from something and hope that the other person didn't notice, that I was going to be really clear about why I was leaving. Yep. And I didn't get anything but respect from people.
Totally.
And I think people saw me as a responsible, hardworking person, and that this wasn't an indication of my laziness or my apathy. This was just me taking care of myself. And by example, I could potentially influence other people to do the same. And that felt really good. And, I still get myself into situations sometimes where I'm get a little bit in over my head. I just took the last 3 months off to have 2 knee replacements. Yeah. And I'm doing great, by the way. And I expect full recovery, and I'm already hustling around like I used to. But it was the first time that I had like taken 3 months off of work to just tend to myself. And even after all of this loud quitting for the 2 years prior, there was still stuff that came up for me that I realized I was doing out of obligation or that I really needed to let go of. It's like peeling away layers of an onion. You think you're done and then there's just more and more and more and more. And I feel like that's sort of my life's work, like shedding, especially as I'm getting older, like shedding, making space for new things.
Yeah.
Like, how do I want to live the next 25 years of my life? And like setting myself up for that in a way that is gentle and kind to myself.
Oh, I'm obsessed with this. Just absolutely obsessed. The idea of just learning to notice that the little spike of anxiety is such a good on-ramp to this, to just go, well, if you could just pay attention to that and then give yourself a few minutes just to sit with it and go, wow, what's the source of this? The amount of times I have little anxiety spikes like that and then I just power through is endless. I could never count how much. Like when I was reading through your list of things that you quit, I'm like, oh, yep. Like so many spaces that for me just drain, but I just do it because I want to please and I'm a hard worker and I have this really toxic idea of ever being lazy.
Same.
Just a real hard worker. And so the thought that some choice I am making appears lazy is just such a deterrent for me, which is the dumbest thing ever. So I really appreciate your leadership on this.
Thank you. Well, I was going to say too that when that feeling of anxiety comes up for you, it isn't always that you need to quit something that you're doing.
True.
Sometimes you realize that, like I was having anxiety this morning just because I was going to be on your podcast. And I was a little nervous because I look up to you and I was like, well, it's going to be fine. You've done this a million times before. She's such a nice person. Yeah. Amy seems like a really great person. Like it's going to be so comfortable. And of course it is. And I've had the best time, but sometimes anxiety is your sort of nervous system trying to protect you from harm,
True.
And it's just something, but the same tool of stopping, acknowledging where is this coming from, and letting it flow through you and letting it dissipate is so helpful. Regardless of whether or not it's a sign that you need to stop doing something, or maybe just that you're anxious, for other reasons. And it's a tool that I've really, like, it's funny. I just turned 57 and, I'm like closer now to 60 than I was to 50. And like, that kind of is so bizarre to me sometimes. And I think about like all of the things that I'm still learning. Yeah. And I'm still like in the last 2 years is really the time when I have started to pay attention to anxiety and really listen to it and not power through it. And I always think, gosh, if I had learned this, 30 years ago, how different would my life have been? And I feel so lucky to be a teacher of those things to people who potentially are younger and can learn from it. And I'm also so grateful that I finally figured that out. So.
Totally. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, this is it. This is the last. Having now you've had such a wide swath of commercial success. I mean, just in ways and in places and in partnerships with vendors, you could just probably could have never even thought up. Yeah. It's just all just bananas. And so I'm curious because also you've dipped into several buckets. You don't just have the one lane, you have a highway, a super highway. And so I'm curious, just personally for you, because maybe it's surprising, maybe it's obvious, I don't know which one. Thus far, what has been the partnership or the account or the commissioning or the contract, whatever it is, the project that you were like, what? Like, this is my favorite thing and the most amazing, career highlight thus far?
Well, it wasn't a commercial job, although I've had many really amazing commercial jobs. I was asked towards the end of 2022 to have a solo exhibit at the St. Mary's College Museum of Art, which is also the Museum of Art at my alma mater. Mm-hmm. And it was a really full circle moment for me. First of all, it's my first museum show. It was alongside the work of Corita Kent. Corita Kent was this very well-known pop artist from the 60s and one of my heroes and influences. So it was like, and they asked me to fill the other half of the museum because they knew that I think I had talked about her being an influence. First alumna ever to have a solo show there. And
it's awesome.
My experience at college was, I think it was definitely, the beginning of my journey. It was the first time anyone was like, you're smart, you're talented, you go do something with your life, because as I said, I grew up in a home where there wasn't a lot of heavy complimenting going on or affirmation. Mm-hmm. And that was really, I had such a wonderful experience there. And so when I was asked to do this show, it was really incredible. It's a Catholic institution. Mm-hmm. I'm not Catholic. I happen to go to a Catholic college. I'm out queer person. Yeah. Have been since I graduated. And they basically were like, do you. And so I created this whole installation in the museum. And it was like, Lisa's, greatest hits, basically. I created some new work, but then there was a lot of recreation of some other work that had been, my Protect the Vulnerable and, some of the other pieces that were so, had gone viral in the past. And the show was super well received and they ended up extending it for months. And the whole process from start to finish of planning that show, creating the pieces for it, installing it, going to the openings, seeing people experience it, hearing from people that they cried the minute they walked through the door, having it be at this place that was so formative in terms of who I was as a human being was just so special. And I will never forget it. I don't know if I will ever have a solo show in a museum again. But that experience was really profound for me and something I will never forget. Yeah.
Gosh, what a great answer. How fantastic. Yeah, that's like a lifetime achievement moment.
It is.
For sure.
It is. I'm like, I can retire now.
That's right. That's right. I love it. Thanks for being here today. Thank you for just your candor and just how open you are to hope and possibility, to art and creation. These are the things that are going to carry us through. They're the things that always have. And so this is just our generation's turn to demonstrate them and to embody them. And that's the best we can do, and you're doing it. And so anyway, just delighted to meet you. And it's so fun to watch good people succeed. I just can't think of anything I love better. It's so exciting to see. And I'm filled with joy that the world is still getting enough right to see good people just continue to rise. And so thanks for being on today. Anytime you're in Austin, we're here. We're your girls. Yeah, we know where to eat.
I will definitely let you know the next time I'm in Austin. And thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
If all of Lisa's work is still not ringing a bell, as soon as you see it, you're going to recognize it. And so if you go over to jenhatmaker.com under the podcast tab, we're going to have all these resources for you, including the send voicemail option if you want to leave us a little blurb about what you are loud quitting these days. But I'll round up Lisa's socials, her website, places you can see her art and buy her art. She has a really unique, interesting artistic point of view, which is why when you see it, you're like, oh, I know her work. I've seen her work. Of course you have. It's everywhere. And so she's just got, and I love that because she's also self-taught. So that is pure Lisa. That is just who she is in her bones. And we'll also have the show notes and everything if you want to share this this episode with anybody. Also, you guys, if you haven't already done it, please subscribe to the show. That'll take you under 5 seconds. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you just hit add or plus or follow, and that's it. It creates your own little library of For the Love episodes, and you can just scroll through and pick up any that you've ever missed. Okay, you guys, more to come in the Midlife series. We love having this conversation with you and can't wait to bring you more. See you next week.